Sunlight streamed through the window behind her, framing her silhouette in a warm golden glow and giving the entire room an almost romantic, dreamlike atmosphere. "The moment I opened the path, you saw through the illusion and stepped inside," she said with quiet admiration, as expected of the one who deciphered even the Tower Master's illusion. In that instant, Lee Hoyle recognized her. She was the woman he had met before at the Crystal Palace. Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo immediately began analyzing the situation with cold, measured logic. Did she open this path to help me? He wondered, testing the possibility without letting emotion cloud his judgment. No, he concluded almost at once. I merely sensed interference in the wall's mana. It felt exactly like the Tower Master's illusion before. I could feel the mana vibrating, twisting, and distorting the space hidden inside the wall. I simply tracked down the altered magical signature and restored it to its original state, he thought with quiet certainty. Magic like this is child's play. The woman paused for a moment as she watched him, then lightly covered her mouth, unable to hide a small laugh. Her laughter rang gently through the room, and for some reason that soft sound made Lee Hoyle's face burn with embarrassment far more than the shouting crowd outside ever had. What's so funny? Hoyle thought, flustered and suspicious all at once. Is she making fun of me? Or is this her way of asking for thanks after saving me? Then her expression suddenly turned serious, and her tone changed. Indeed, she said, if someone feels they are being underestimated, then they must prove their worth. That single line hit so hard that Lee Hoyle felt like he wanted to dig a hole, crawl into it, and disappear from sheer embarrassment. How does she know that line? He thought, stunned. Yet her face remained composed and solemn. Adventurer Lee Hoyle, she said, placing a hand over her heart with flawless aristocratic grace. You are likely the only mage who has ever called the Tower Master's illusion simple. There was no mockery in her voice now, only clear recognition of what he had done. I suppose my greeting comes rather late, she continued, bowing her head slightly in a polished, elegant manner. I am Yuja, a senior mage of the healing school. Her gaze locked onto his with firm seriousness as she delivered the real reason for her presence. Under Chief Mage Marcello's authority, I officially approve your participation in our joint magic research. At once, a system window chimed brightly in front of him, announcing success with almost perfect timing. He had now persuaded the majority, 8 out of 20. By the time he returned home at 8 in the morning, the result was already sitting clearly in his mind. Lee Hoyle scrolled through the morning news, only for his expression to stiffen. The top headline read, Lee Hoyle, not the hero of the archipelago. The third article was even worse, Yuja's mixed review of his performance. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at the screen. What is this garbage? He muttered in disbelief. What exactly are they trying to make me explain now? Annoyance and confusion rose together as he kept reading. The internet, as always, was ruthless. Please stop messing with me, Hoyle thought bitterly. The comment section was an all-out battlefield, full of people tearing at one another without mercy. I saw it with my own eyes, one user insisted. Another fired back in his defense. If you weren't even there, then shut up and sit down. Others stayed skeptical, no matter what anyone said. Honestly, I'll believe it when I see the full video, one comment read. The more Hoyle scrolled, the stranger and dirtier the whole thing felt. What kind of game are they playing here? He wondered uneasily. But Lee Hoyle had bigger problems than internet drama. He lifted his eyes toward his reflection, only to see that Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo was already doing pull-ups as if rest were a foreign concept. Why am I still not resting? Hoyle groaned in disbelief. Then the system window appeared before him once more, cold and merciless as ever. No mercy. Train your weak body. 500 reps. The notification appeared with merciless clarity, and Lee Hoyle nearly cried on the spot. Inside, he was already weeping. Can't I just sleep for once? Did Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo seriously know nothing about work-life balance? Swallowing his despair, he let out a tired breath and pulled up his status window. Level 226. Not bad at all for a leveling Manhwa protagonist. Thanks to these endless daily quests, though, both his strength and agility had shot up by more than 30 points each. At this level, that meant he was sitting 10 to 20 points above almost everyone else around him. Hoyle had to admit it, at least in his head. Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo's discipline was terrifying, but it worked. Just from repeating daily tasks over and over, the gap had become absurdly wide. Yeah, absolutely wonderful, Hoyle thought with a mix of awe and exhaustion. While he was still marveling at the results, Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo stood there calmly slicing carrots with almost surgical precision. Of course, for a demon hunter, raw physical stats were never supposed to be the main focus. We still lack proper melee skills and any real wide-range combat abilities, he thought with a sigh, reluctantly accepting the truth. Still, at least we're ridiculously efficient when it comes to errands. I just wish I got more magic points out of all this. Hoyle slumped down near Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo's feet, worn out before the day had even properly started. Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo's talent let him master magic almost instantly, as if spells were second nature to him. If only he had that same absurd genius when it came to close-quarters combat, Hoyle thought bitterly. Then maybe this whole body-training nightmare would not feel so cruel. He watched the carrot pieces fall in a steady rhythm, clean and even, one after another. The motion reminded him strangely of that sword move Harkon had used before. But this felt different somehow, lighter, sharper, and more natural, like the movement itself was alive. A strange sense of possibility stirred. Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo suddenly paused for a brief instant, as though replaying Harkon's fluid strike inside his mind. The image became clearer and clearer, carrying with it a sensation of perfect balance and almost unnatural weightlessness. Without him even noticing at first, blue mana began to coil around the kitchen knife in thin, swirling streams. Lee Hoyle gasped. The blade seemed to stretch beyond its own shape, as if an invisible edge had grown from it, and then a terrifying, earth-shaking force burst outward in silence. The sliced carrots froze in midair. Even the scattered droplets of water hung suspended around them, caught in that impossible moment as if time itself had suddenly stopped to watch. Then the wall split open. One cut, two halves, 100 whispering gusts. Lee Hoyle's eyes nearly popped out of his skull as he stared at the damage spreading in a clean, unbelievable line. What on earth? In a single strike, while chopping vegetables, you learned a legendary sword art? Hoyle's mind practically screamed. Outside, the water spray drifting through the air caught the light and arched into a magnificent rainbow, as if the world itself wanted to celebrate that ridiculous slash. "Mom, look! Water fireworks!" a child shouted from outside. A passerby stopped for a moment and smiled up at the scene. What a beautiful rainbow! Meanwhile, far away at the guild headquarters construction site in the Yusra archipelago, a very different kind of storm was brewing. Ben Lucy, dressed in rough construction gear, stood with her phone in hand and an intense, predatory stare in her eyes. She looked less like a guild master reviewing updates and more like someone hunting for a target. Her subordinates trembled as they watched her. One of them whispered nervously, "Why is the guild master here again? And what is she staring at with that terrifying face?" He carefully peeked at her screen, then immediately regretted it. "I have no idea," he muttered. On the display, a reporter was offering excuse after excuse on behalf of the Shining Council over the island incident. Therefore, the council claims the bug was successfully handled by their knights, and we ask for your understanding. Before the man could even finish feeding the public that polished lie, Ben Lucy swiped to the next video with a disgusted flick of her thumb. She had already lost interest. The W Clan fanatics, meanwhile, were absolutely losing their minds across the internet, flooding every platform with feverish praise and wild arguments. They were shouting about Lee Hoyle's greatness, insisting their idol had soloed the entire monster wave by himself. "I was there," one person yelled in a video comment. "The pressure was suffocating. You have no idea how close we were to complete annihilation." The moment that deadly sin appeared, every single hunter froze like a statue. The noise alone was enough to grind on Ben Lucy's nerves. She scrolled again, only to find some random nobody breaking down the battle like a cheap mana recap, confidently claiming top-ranker Scar had been the real hero while everyone else just stood there paralyzed. They simply refused to believe that a player with no powerful background, no flashy support, and no established reputation like Lee Hoyle could take down a deadly sin alone. The forums were buzzing with denial. all of them insisting Scar must have carried the raid. That was the final straw. Ben Lucy's eyes flashed with rage, and she hurled her phone straight at the ground. It shattered into pieces instantly. Damn it, she snapped. Why do these ignorant keyboard warriors talk so much trash? Her two subordinates watched the explosion with completely different expressions on their faces, each of them already used to different sides of their guild master's temper. The older man looked deeply concerned. With a temper like a volcano and a mouth like a sailor, where exactly were they supposed to use her diplomatic skills? He silently mourned the innocent phone that had just been sacrificed. The younger one, on the other hand, barely reacted at all. He calmly sipped his drink and shrugged. Obviously, we use that temper when we go to war with other guilds. Just then, a pink-haired girl arrived and took in the shattered remains of the device at a glance. She did not even flinch. Smiling brightly, she asked, "Oh, my big sister Ben Lucy, what caused the explosion this time?" The old man found himself reluctantly nodding at the younger guy's logic. True, against rival guilds, that kind of fiery passion really was a strategic asset. Ben Lucy was still fuming as she turned to the smiling girl and vented without holding back. It's those brain-dead idiots online. They keep saying the deadly sin kill was a fluke, or that Scar did it. It was obviously Lee Hoyle. He captured that thing solo. They keep saying he stole the kill, or that the knights did all the work. They don't know a single thing. As Ben Lucy kept ranting about Lee Hoyle, the pink-haired girl tilted her head and noticed a very suspicious pattern in all that anger. "Oh my," she said sweetly. "Are you feeling indignant on behalf of Mr. Lee Hoyle right now?" The question landed perfectly. Ben Lucy's whole face turned bright red in an instant, and she started stammering so fast she could barely keep up with herself. "What? No. Why would I? Am I crazy?" she blurted out. "It's just business. He helped us with the first quest, and he helped this time too. That's all. It's purely because we owe him a debt." The pink-haired girl giggled at the desperate explanation. Sure. But you're furious because people are insulting Lee Hoyle, and you still won't admit you care. That's adorable, Ben. Ben Lucy nearly screamed. "I told you that's not it." The two male subordinates, naturally, decided this was the perfect time to poke the bear. The guy with the soda smirked shamelessly. "Looks like our guild master is stuck inside a romance webtoon." The older man pretended to be sympathetic, but joined the attack anyway. "Oh dear, what terrible crime did young Lee Hoyle commit to deserve such fierce punishment?" The moment those words left their mouths, Ben Lucy summoned magic without hesitation and buried both of them in the earth up to their necks. The pink-haired girl quickly guided the still-fuming guild master away, leaving the two buried men behind like decorative lawn ornaments. "Come on, sis, calm down," she said cheerfully. "Those internet trolls will shut up soon enough once the truth comes out. Don't waste your energy on them. Let's talk about something more exciting." Then she suddenly remembered an important detail and brightened. "Sis, do you remember in the old game Arcana, when your national influence rose high enough, you could receive a title?" Ben Lucy paused mid-step. Her anger slowly cooled, and a much more thoughtful expression settled over her face as the memory began to click into place. The girl continued, clearly pleased with herself. "Once we finish this massive reconstruction quest, your relationship with the Yusra Kingdom should hit max level. That means a huge amount of influence points. And with enough friendship and influence in Yusra, you won't just get rewards. You'll be granted a noble title in your own territory. Even the kingdom's officials will have to bow to you." The image of a knighting ceremony instantly washed over Ben Lucy's mind. She imagined the looks on Locke and Scar's faces when they were forced to bow their heads before her. A slow, satisfied, slightly sinister grin spread across her face. The pink-haired girl noticed the change immediately. "Oh, are you smiling now, Ben?" she teased. Ben Lucy immediately blushed and snapped back. "I am not." But the girl ignored the denial completely. "See? Our big sister looks way cuter when she smiles." Still laughing, she reached up and pinched Ben Lucy's cheeks while the two men remained buried in the ground behind them, completely forgotten. Ben Lucy struggled and waved for a timeout, but even in the middle of the playful mess, her thoughts were racing. The reconstruction of the Yusra Kingdom was not some ordinary quest. It was a golden chance. She thought of the island's abundant mineral veins, the kind of resources that could change a guild's future overnight. This was not just a quest reward. It was practically a natural treasure island, packed with resources Arcana desperately needed. Even without diving into a dimensional rift, simply securing the mining rights here would be worth a fortune beyond reason. It was the kind of opportunity people would kill for. So why had Lee Hoyle handed something this valuable over to them? She recalled the moment Lee Hoyle had calmly proposed an alliance to Hakuna, as if offering away immense profit meant nothing to him at all. She still could not figure out his angle. After a long sigh, she muttered under her breath, "I guess I owe him another massive debt. Seriously, when am I ever going to get the chance to sit down and drink tea with him properly?" As she said it, she absent-mindedly fixed her hair. The pink-haired girl perked up immediately. "Huh? What was that?" Ben Lucy waved both hands at once and shut it down in a panic. "Nothing." Meanwhile, somewhere else, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo was walking past the construction site looking as cool and composed as ever, right until his phone buzzed and dragged him back to reality with a message from his landlord. "Young man, I rented to you because you seemed honest, quiet, and clean. But what is this? You completely trashed the apartment." Even seeing the fury in the landlord's words, Granfell replied with calm, measured formality. "It was my mistake. I used a power I could not yet control properly. Please send me the bill for the repairs." The landlord, finding that answer painfully lacking in sincerity, exploded even harder. "What kind of excuse is that?" Granfell quietly put the phone away and checked the time. On the outside he looked calm, but inside he was absolutely sweating. That was way too close, he thought grimly. "I awakened Sorgwi, but I nearly died because I could not control the output." The memory alone made his stomach tighten. He remembered the exact scene vividly, the kitchen knife in his hand, the sudden eruption of blinding Sorgwi, the terrifying powers spilling out far beyond what he intended. Panic crept back in as he searched for a solution. How am I supposed to lower the intensity? He could still remember how fast his HP bar had drained. Just one burst had left him bedridden for 6 entire days. "My stamina is dropping in real time," he screamed inwardly. Even while Granfell kept walking with steady purpose, his mind was racing ahead. "If I search for Sorgwi guides on leveling Manhwa forums, all I find is useless fantasy novel nonsense. Nothing practical, nothing real. I came to Yusra Island on a hunch," he told himself. "I do not know whether Harkon will actually teach me, but I have to try." As he approached the entrance with that resolve hardening in his chest, a guard stepped forward and blocked his way. "Halt! Stop right there." Granfell stopped and looked at the man in confusion. "Excuse me?" he asked. The guard straightened and replied in an official tone. "The kingdom is currently under reconstruction. Unauthorized entry is forbidden," the guard continued. His hand moved toward the permit records as he demanded, "Do you have proof of Yusra citizenship or a certified entry pass?" Granfell answered in his usual calm, stoic manner, without even blinking. "I do not." Internally, though, he was mildly impressed. They set up an administrative system this fast. The efficiency was almost admirable. The guard's eyes, however, lit up with the unmistakable thrill of a small power trip. "Then you cannot enter. I am terribly sorry, but please leave." The guard smiled as he said it, but the politeness was coated in open condescension. Granfell thought dryly. Did the people of Arcana migrate here? That would explain the bureaucracy. Still, despite the rejection, he did not back down. "I came to meet Harkon," he said evenly. "Is there truly no way?" he asked. The guard paused, clearly thrown off by the name drop. "Huh? Are you referring to Lord Harkon?" "Yes," Granfell replied. The guard looked at him as though he had just heard a lunatic speak. His expression shifted from fake politeness to naked disdain for this supposed commoner standing in front of him. Granfell immediately sensed the change in attitude. "Okay, now I am getting annoyed," he thought, the irritation beginning to show beneath his otherwise cold expression. Even so, he made one last effort to remain diplomatic. "Could you at least pass along a message to Harkon or Hakuna?" Before he could finish the sentence, the guard scoffed loudly and shut him down. "Denied. This is ridiculous. Who are you to casually speak the names of Lord Harkon and His Majesty the King?" The face-slapping moment was practically winding up in the background. The guard sneered and went on. "You think pretending to be their friend is going to save you? I have seen 1,000 cheap adventurers like you. Benefactor of His Majesty? Don't make me laugh. You're just Lee Hoyle, a man full of hot air. And just as the guard spat out that last insult, Hakuna suddenly burst onto the scene, waving his arm like an excited child who had spotted someone important from far away. Sir Li Hoyle. The guard's jaw dropped at the sheer familiarity in Hakuna's voice, while Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo quietly cleared his throat, a sharp little warning to maintain dignity, if only for appearances. The soldier froze so completely, it looked as if his soul had slipped out of his body and abandoned the rest behind. In that suffocating moment, a holographic interface rose into the air, and a system window materialized in plain sight, displaying the protagonist's legendary status within the Yusra Kingdom with crushing authority. The poor fool immediately began trembling like a leaf caught in a violent storm. His knees looked ready to give out at any second. On the outside, though, Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo remained perfectly still, as cold and untouchable as a noble statue carved from ice. But inside, Li Hoyle was losing his mind. Does dropping a name trigger some kind of status effect now? This is literally a cheat code straight out of a leveling manhwa. Hakuna hurried forward and bowed low with genuine respect. Oh, benefactor, are you here on personal business? Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo answered in the same cool, measured tone as always. I had intended to speak with you, he said calmly, but apparently I require a permit first. The guard's face drained of color so fast he looked halfway dead already. Beside him, Hakuna's aura flared with visible rage. A permit? Hakuna thundered, staring at the guard in disbelief. Do you have any idea who is standing before you? This man holds authority equal to my own in the Yusra Kingdom. The guard shook so hard that his armor actually rattled. Hakuna's glare only sharpened. Have you ever seen a king ask permission to enter his own land? Hakuna's voice boomed like a cannon blast. Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo felt, for a brief, absurd moment, like a five-star general being stopped by a rookie private at the gate. He merely raised one eyebrow. Is that really how it works? He thought. Internally, Li Hoyle smirked. Apology accepted. As he ignored the terrified soldier, one thing became painfully clear. His standing in this world was far more terrifying than he had originally calculated. With that nuisance out of the way, Hakuna turned back at once, his eyes now sparkling with excitement. So, did you truly come all this way just to see me, my lord? Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo paused for a brief second, then began to explain his purpose. Meanwhile, far away on the coast, the Li Hoyle Heart Knights were going through pure hell. Their commander, Jessica, barked orders with the intensity of a demon drill instructor. Pathetic. Straighten your backs. Raise those blades higher. Do you think demons will show you mercy just because you look tired? Her voice cracked across the training ground like a whip. Louder, she roared again. The soldiers shouted at the top of their lungs and swung their steel harder, but Jessica still looked unimpressed. I can't hear you. Scream until your lungs bleed. Outside, the drill ground was chaos. Inside the command tent, however, the air felt almost strangely calm. Hakuna slowly lowered his teacup and studied him. You wish to learn the way of sword, aura? Outside, the brutal cries of the trainees served as a savage background soundtrack, their agonized shouts drifting in from the field. Li Hoyle, meanwhile, took a very composed sip of tea and answered with calm precision. Correct. I want to master the control of the aura that coats your blade. Hakuna's eyes widened in surprise. So you truly possess the eyes to see that invisible light. Then his expression turned serious. But listen to me. Even with 10 years of blood, sweat, and effort, someone without inborn talent may never even sense aura at all. You really do keep defying common sense. Hakuna murmured in open amazement as he stared at Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo, who remained as composed as ever. Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo set his teacup down with smooth, elegant precision. It is hardly surprising, he said. Greatness recognizes greatness. Zero humility. As always, Li Hoyle thought helplessly. Hakuna let out a long, heavy sigh. Even so, I must refuse. Sword aura is not some parlor trick that can be picked up on a whim, not even by a master swordsman. Besides, are you not fundamentally a mage class? Hakuna continued. Even if you can see the energy, you would still need 10 years of physical conditioning to use it properly. Do you think this is some generic mana recap, where people become monsters overnight. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo cut him off without hesitation. I have already awakened it. Hakuna blinked, caught completely off guard. Lord Li Hoyle, surely you just... But Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's gaze never shifted. I do not joke, he said flatly. The power is already mine. What I need from you is not permission. It is methodology. Hakuna inhaled sharply, the weight of those words landing all at once. Commander Jessica, Hakuna suddenly shouted. The call rang out so sharply that even the fierce instructor outside visibly flinched. Yes, sir, Jessica answered at once. Hakuna's voice was firm. Bring the sword and the lion's oath immediately. Jessica hesitated for only a moment at the strange order, then bowed without question. Understood. Throughout all of this, Li Hoyle sat there looking like the picture of perfect tranquility, though inside, he was paying attention to every word. A short while later, a massive stone slab carved with the face of a lion was hauled out before the Li Hoyle Heart Knights. Its presence alone made the air feel heavier. Lauren stared at it, sweat already gathering on his brow as unease crawled up his spine. What is this? Just an iron plate, he whispered under his breath, unable to hide his confusion. The lion's oath, Jessica muttered back. Then she glanced at him sharply. Why are you trembling? Lauren swallowed hard. I have no idea what the commander is planning, he stammered. Hakuna stepped forward, his voice filled with reverence as he addressed the gathered knights. This iron wall is the lion's oath, a relic passed down through generations. It was forged from star metal, a material that does not exist in this realm. Its durability is absolute, like an oath that cannot be broken. His hand hovered over the ancient surface. Only 2 scars exist on it. One was left by the first commander. The second is the mark I carved myself. Even Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo raised an eyebrow slightly at that history. Hakuna then drew his blade, and the steel gave off a clear, ringing song as it left the sheath. Well then, Lord Li Hoyle, Hakuna said, turning and pointing the blade toward the mage with solemn intent. If you truly possess sword aura, then prove it. Become the master of the 3rd scar. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo fixed his gaze on the legendary blade, his expression unreadable. Lauren panicked at once. Commander, how can an outsider... Silence, Jessica hissed sharply. There was no way some casual adventurer could do this, unless the commander had a plan. Lauren opened his mouth again, but before he could speak, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo gave a faint smirk. I cannot wield that sword, he said evenly. The knights around him exchanged confused glances at once. Was he backing down after all? For a split second, that impossible thought flickered through all of their minds. But Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo simply strode past the legendary weapon and snatched a chipped training sword from one of the stunned grunts nearby. This dull scrap will be enough, he said. Hakuna and Lauren looked as though they had just seen a ghost. A training sword? That flimsy blade would shatter on impact, they thought in horror. But the very moment Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo wrapped his hand around the hilt, the entire atmosphere changed. The air grew tight, heavy, and electric, as if the world itself had drawn in a breath. Boom! A terrifying golden aura erupted and swallowed the battered steel whole. Jessica gasped. The soldiers forgot how to breathe. Then, with one casual swing, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo unleashed something that felt less like a strike and more like a storm. The lion's oath did not merely crack. It was utterly obliterated, reduced in one instant by a blow no one there could fully comprehend. Lauren's mind went completely blank. Impossible. This is insanity. That was Grandmaster-level aura, from a filthy mage? His thoughts could barely keep up. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo stood there amid the silence like the answer to a question no one had dared ask. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo lowered the training sword and looked almost bored. Is that sufficient? He asked. In reality, Li Hoyle's HP bar was crashing fast, and he was only seconds away from collapsing on the spot. Hakuna's face lit up with pure admiration, the kind that could not be hidden even if he tried. Li Hoyle, you never fail to exceed expectations, Hakuna said with heartfelt praise. My curiosity about your potential has now reached its absolute peak. Then he noticed something else. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's hands were trembling violently. Look at him shaking, Hakuna thought with unexpected tenderness. He must be overwhelmed with emotion at the chance to learn. In reality, of course, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo was simply running on fumes and barely holding himself together from pure stamina loss. Hakuna turned sharply toward his subordinates. Listen carefully, Jessica, Enoch, Lauren. He joins the training starting now. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo quietly tried to stop his hands from vibrating while the knights shouted in unison, "Yes, sir." Hakuna smiled with almost paternal satisfaction. "We begin from zero," Hakuna declared. "These three are elite aura masters, but first you need a body capable of enduring that power. Prepare yourself for physical conditioning hell, and absolutely no swords until I say otherwise." Hearing that, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo almost burst into tears of gratitude on the inside. "Thank God, my arms are already jelly," Li Hoyle thought in relief. "Hakuna, you are the real MVP." On the outside, however, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo merely gave a slow, stoic nod. "Acceptable," he said. And with that, the grueling training regimen officially began. Lauren ran while quietly analyzing everything he had just seen. A mage learning the sword. The captain practically adores him. And yet he refused the captain's relic, almost as if he wanted to spare the blade itself. He actually respects hierarchy, Lauren realized. I judged him too quickly. I need to treat him with proper honor from now on, Lauren decided firmly. And then, just as that thought settled in his mind, a shadow loomed over him. "I am Jessica," the instructor announced, her voice snapping like a lash. "Welcome to the Li Hoyle Heart Meat Grinder. Go change into your gear." As Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo walked away, Jessica narrowed her eyes. He may have aura, but at the end of the day, he is still a fragile spellcaster. Without stamina, that kind of power is useless in real combat, she thought coldly. "I'm going to break you, pretty boy." But then Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo began to change, and the confidence in her gaze wavered. As the shirt came off, Jessica bit her lip without realizing it. Her sadistic glare slowly melted into something far more dangerous. A hungry, almost fascinated stare. "Sweet mother of system windows, look at those abs. That is some seriously high-tier loot right there," Lauren whispered under her breath, barely containing her awe. Did you just gulp?" Jessica's face flushed a deep shade of red, caught off guard by the moment. She quickly cleared her throat and forced her composure back into place. "Silence. Training begins now. First lesson, learn the grip." Trying to bury the lingering blush on her cheeks, she barked out the order with strict authority. "Everyone, extend your blades and hold your stance." The command cut through the air like a whip, snapping the group instantly into formation as steel slid free from scabbards in unison. Lauren watched the line of trainees like a hawk circling its prey, her sharp eyes dissecting every tiny mistake. "You're leaning too far forward. Straighten your spine and shift your center." Jessica roared corrections one after another. "Left hand to the navel. Feel your balance there. Lock that thumb tight, and don't let your right foot flare outward." Her voice hammered across the training ground like rapid strikes. "Remember this well. The right hand drives the destruction. Everyone, execute a vertical slash." Lauren folded her arms while observing, silently thinking to herself, that woman is absolutely possessed by the sword. Among the trainees, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo followed the command with focused intensity, though his thoughts raced wildly. How exactly had Sir Harkin wielded his blade earlier? The memory replayed in his mind, fast, precise, overwhelming, like a storm compressed into a single strike. As he visualized the overwhelming aura of the Grand Knight, he slowly closed his eyes. His breathing steadied, and with deliberate control he lifted the sword high above his head, letting the image of that devastating strike burn itself into his mind. Suddenly, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo felt something strange stir within him, like a spark igniting deep in his chest. Romeo's eyes snapped open in an instant. In that brief flash of understanding, clarity struck him like lightning. Without hesitation, he brought the sword crashing down in a single decisive motion. Boom! The blade slammed downward with terrifying force. Sand and loose stones exploded outward in every direction, the shockwave rippling across the ground. Lauren and Jessica stood frozen in place, their hair standing on end as if a bolt of lightning had just passed through them. Lauren rushed forward in disbelief, frantically smoothing down her windblown hair as she approached him, her mind still struggling to process what she had just witnessed. Wait a moment, Sir Li Hoi. How in the world did you do that? Her voice trembled between amazement and confusion as she stared at the cratered ground. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo answered calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. I simply tried to mirror Sir Harkin's movement. Lauren's jaw nearly hit the floor. Mirrored? That's completely absurd. No one just mirrors that technique. That strike, that is the commander's signature swordsmanship. It is the pinnacle technique every Li Hoi Heart Knight spends their entire life chasing. Jessica's mind flashed back to the terrifying power of Harkin's blade. She had doubted this mage could even handle a sword properly. Yet here he was, perfectly recreating a legendary art after seeing it only once. With that level of sword aura lingering in the air, Jessica realized this was far beyond an ordinary moment of mana recall. I thought he was just some eccentric mage, but this is the talent of a monster. Meanwhile, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo casually weighed the sword in his hand and gave a small satisfied smile. Not bad at all. From a distance, Harkin watched silently and nodded with firm conviction. A prodigy sent by the heavens. He possesses the potential to surpass even me one day. Harkin sighed quietly. What a tragic waste that such a man chose to walk the path of magic instead of the blade. Still, Harkin's lips curled into a determined smile. Then I must guide him properly before the mage tower monopolizes his talent. Just then, a voice called from behind. Captain Harkin, your majesty has arrived. Harkin immediately bowed his head. King Hakuna stepped forward with a mischievous grin spreading across his face. I heard that my savior wishes to walk the path of the sword. Naturally, I had to come and witness it myself. The king suddenly frowned as he examined the ground beneath his feet. This beach, there is far too much sand. I worry the dust might harm my benefactor's delicate health. Hakuna's gaze darkened dangerously, sending chills down the spines of the knights standing behind him. Panic erupted instantly. The knights grabbed brooms and began sweeping the beach like their lives depended on it. Is he worried Sir Li Hoi might catch a cold from dust? Don't leave a single grain. Sweep like your lives depend on it. But Hakuna still wasn't satisfied. And this sun, it is mercilessly bright. What if my savior collapses from heatstroke? The king's voice rang with exaggerated concern. Harkon began sweating nervously. Under that terrifying royal glare, the knights sprinted into the nearby forest in sheer desperation. Like a swarm of frantic locusts, they uprooted fully grown trees and replanted them across the beach in mere seconds, instantly creating a patchwork oasis of shade. Harkin nodded solemnly. Your Majesty's attention to the smallest training details is truly inspiring. Truly, a shining example for the people. Hakuna beamed proudly, his eyes crinkling with delight. Is that so? Harkin continued, his voice trembling slightly with dramatic emotion. I had no idea your Majesty carried such deep concern for the Knights' training environment. As captain of the order, I cannot simply stand by. Jessica and Enoch saluted sharply. Understood. Yet to everyone's shock, Hakuna suddenly tore off his royal armor with excitement. It seems I have too much free time today, the king declared cheerfully. Therefore, I shall join the training myself. Do not feel burdened by my rank. Treat me exactly as you would a new recruit. Enoch immediately broke into a cold sweat. Excuse me, what exactly is the commander saying? Jessica felt the pressure multiply 100-fold in an instant. Your Majesty, please calm yourself. We must first consult the other trainees. The instructors hurriedly tried to intervene, while the crowd nodded frantically in agreement. Yes, absolutely. With full confidence, Hakuna pointed directly at Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo. Romeo, let us ask him. May I join your training, Sir Lee? Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo instantly felt the murderous aura radiating from Enoch and Jessica behind him. If I agree to this, he realized grimly, I'll become public enemy number one. Yet outwardly, he maintained perfect noble composure. Of course, your Majesty is always welcome. Internally, however, he couldn't care less. That said, King Hakuna, my training is already complete for today. Perhaps you could train with Jessica instead. And Enoch as well. Hakuna clapped his hands enthusiastically. A brilliant suggestion, Sir Li Hoi. Meanwhile, Jessica and Enoch slowly backed themselves into a corner, their blood boiling with rage. That magnificent bastard. The king's voice thundered across the beach. Now begin. Attack me until you are satisfied. A deafening yes, sir, erupted from the knights, marking the beginning of the most painfully awkward training session in history. As the suffering continued, the scene gradually shifted elsewhere, to the Mage Tower, a monument of arcane power. A heavy knock echoed against a thick wooden door deep within the tower's halls. Enter. The response came calmly from within. Inside the dim laboratory, lit only by flickering magical lamps, a hooded figure approached a man completely buried in piles of research documents and arcane diagrams. This man was Matthew, a high mage belonging to the dark magic faction. His reputation alone carried enormous weight within the tower. You are the one who raised dark magic from ridicule to its current prestige, the messenger said respectfully. If not for Marcello, you would undoubtedly sit upon the throne of the Mage Tower. Matthew's eyes were like cold, bottomless abysses. Speak. The messenger immediately presented several strange artifacts. I brought these because Sir Li Hoi submitted them for appraisal earlier. They all radiate powerful dark energy. Matthew's brow furrowed deeply. Li Hoi, are you referring to the adventurer currently cooperating with head mage Marcello? As he examined the items spread across the table, Matthew's thoughts began racing rapidly. These are not ordinary trinkets. Impure crystals, carp scale silk, and the centerpiece, the vampire count's orb. A normal human could never possess such things. Just who in the world is this Li Hoi? After a long moment of silence, Matthew's expression darkened with interest. Send a message scroll to Li Hoi immediately. I will personally conduct the appraisal. Meanwhile, night slowly descended over Yazra Island. The mighty warriors who had trained all day collapsed onto their beds, groaning and half-crying for their mothers in utter exhaustion. Yet despite the universal collapse, one man continued pushing himself relentlessly. A blue holographic screen flashed in front of him. System alert. Daily quest. Run 20 kilometers. Complete 1,000 push-ups. Pull-ups in progress. Sit-ups. 465 of 500 completed. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's body moved mechanically like a tireless machine, while Li Hoi's soul screamed in agony inside. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's muscles screamed in protest. I'm going to die. I've absolutely reached my physical limit after Harkin's insane boot camp earlier today. Every fiber of his body trembled with exhaustion. He remembered the morning's torture vividly. Harkin had run like a madman. It has been ages since I trained like this. He had shouted cheerfully. 100 more laps. 20 kilometers run complete. Meanwhile, Li Hoi's soul raged internally. Harkon, you battle-crazy old man. Read the room and get lost already. Ding. You have exceeded your physical limits. Hidden conditions met. Rewards available. Li Hoi's eyes widened as the status window appeared. Stamina, 35. Agility, 37. Mana, 126. This was the essence of leveling through mana itself. Instantly, the crushing fatigue evaporated. But Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's body was already collapsing. I need sleep immediately. Just then, a magical carrier bird descended from the night sky. A scroll unrolled in midair, projecting a calm voice. Greetings. I am High Mage Matthew Dinka of the Dark Magic Faction. I am contacting you regarding the appraisal results for your submitted items. Sir Li Hoi. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo blinked slowly in surprise. Right, the items I left at the tower earlier. He straightened slightly and responded calmly. Proceed. Matthew continued in a steady voice. First item, the Vampire Count's Orb. Rank, unique. Level requirement, 400. A sphere condensed from the essence of a vampire. When the blood sealed within it detonates, it unleashes catastrophic area damage capable of annihilating entire battlefields in a single burst. This was no ordinary item, but an extremely rare demonic artifact, the kind most people would never even see in their lifetime. I would like to lease it for research purposes, Matthew said with careful restraint, though the desire in his voice was hard to miss. Li Hoi's mind began calculating at once. Level 400. I can't equip something like that yet anyway. At the very least, I can turn this favor into leverage and use it later to reclaim my medallion. This actually works out better than expected. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo answered in a voice as cold and regal as ever. Very well. I will grant you permission. Then, without missing a beat, he continued, what about the other artifacts? Matthew calmly resumed the appraisal. There is also a unique grade unrefined crystal. It carries no level restrictions at all. Its structure has preserved the flawless purity of a high-grade emerald, with almost no degradation in quality. Our analysis also confirms that it produces a life recovery effect when the bearer is under attack. It would be an ideal core material for crafting the island treasure known as jewelry set. And this one is a unique grade radiant carp silk. Once again, there are no level restrictions attached to it. When used in crafting, it greatly improves fire attribute stability and raises evasion efficiency as well. More interestingly, it can even unlock a hidden aesthetic stat. It is, without question, the kind of material suited for a truly legendary creation. If possible, could I perhaps lease this silk as well? Granfell folded his arms and sank into thought, his face unreadable. Aesthetics? I've never even heard of a stat like that in any leveling mana system. What is that supposed to do? Meanwhile, inside, Li Hui's soul was practically on fire with curiosity. I have to check that for myself somehow. There's no way I can just let that slide. But on the outside, Granfell's noble mask did not crack for even a second. I cannot permit you to simply rent the radiant carp silk. I already intend to use the unrefined crystal in jewelry crafting, and the silk itself will be made into a handkerchief. His tone made it sound less like a decision and more like a royal decree. Matthew kept an impressively straight face. I understand your position. However, should you wish to pursue large-scale production later, the potential profits would be astronomical. Li Hui did not budge. It was time to deploy the ultimate negotiation technique he had perfected during his miserable corporate slave days. Since this is my first commission, I will need to assess the final quality before making any future decisions. I have yet to witness the Mage Tower's true capabilities with my own eyes. Show me the very best of your skill. Impress me with flawless efficiency. Granfell pushed the scroll forward toward Matthew in a way that caught the mage completely off guard. His expression carried a supreme arrogance, wearing a smile that barely deserved to be called one. I demand absolute perfection, no matter the cost. Inside, Li Hui was screaming in agony. Who told you to say that? That's my money you're gambling with. But from Matthew's side, the words landed differently. The moment he heard there was effectively no budget limit, his eyes gleamed with open greed and professional excitement. As Matthew stared at Granfell in silence, one thought surfaced clearly in his mind. Marcello absolutely did not choose this man at random. There was far too much hidden beneath that calm face. He is truly a fascinating man, Matthew thought to himself, unable to hide his growing interest. After a brief pause, he lowered his head in a smooth, respectful bow. As you wish. Meanwhile, inside, Li Hui felt like a shriveled old man who had already lived 90 exhausting years. Good. Conversation over. I seriously can't keep up this act any longer. It's time to sleep. The moment the exchange ended, Li Hui threw himself onto the bed and instantly started snoring, all while Granfell's dignity somehow remained intact, leaving Matthew talking to empty air. Wait a moment, Sir Li, Matthew started to say, only to stop mid-sentence. He gritted his teeth and muttered under his breath. Damn it. He actually fell asleep. The absurdity of it left him frozen for a moment. I cannot possibly disturb his rest now. With that, he turned quietly to leave, scribbling a short message onto a scroll before departing. I shall wait for you at the Sky Garden. The note he left behind read, I will await your presence at the Sky Garden. I humbly invite you to a private dialogue with me. The wording was formal, respectful, and unmistakably deliberate. It was signed by a high mage of the dark magic school, and as that quiet invitation lingered in the room, dawn slowly broke over the island. The darkness faded, and a pale new light spread across the horizon. While most of the world still slept soundly, a lone figure was already sprinting along the coastline. The rhythmic sound of footsteps cut through the morning air as the sea breeze whipped past him. Granfell was mercilessly pushing through his physical conditioning routine without slowing down for even a second. Deep inside, Li Hui felt a strange little swell of pride rise up. He was still suffering, but now there was at least a hint of satisfaction mixed in with it. I'm finally starting to get the hang of this leveling mana life. Just then, an owl came diving down out of the sky, clutching a note in its claws, its face disturbingly human in a way that made the whole thing even stranger. It let out a sharp squawk. Sir Li Hoyal. The letter read, I grew concerned after receiving no reply since last night. My deepest apologies if this message disturbs your peace. The tone was so polite, it almost felt desperate. Li Hoi blinked in confusion. Huh? What message? Granfell, of course, remained outwardly calm and icy. A message? He repeated coolly. Only then did it become clear that a note had arrived at dawn without him ever noticing. Granfell gave a faint sigh of regret. I completely missed that correspondence. The ignored message had originally said, I await you at the Sky Garden. Please join me for a discussion. Signed, High Mage of the Dark Magic School, Matthew. Then Matthew's voice projected directly from the paper. Fortunately, it may be for the best that you did not see it earlier, as my schedule has since changed. I would now like to formally invite you to the Sky Garden tomorrow afternoon instead. Granfell's refusal came back so quickly, it was almost ruthless. Difficult. Matthew faltered at once. Difficult? Are you occupied then? In that case, perhaps noon would be more convenient? Granfell did not even blink before answering. Still difficult. His tone remained perfectly flat, which somehow made it hit even harder. Matthew inhaled sharply. Good heavens, you must be completely buried in work rebuilding the kingdom. Then perhaps early morning. Granfell cut him off before he could finish. That will also be difficult. There was not a trace of hesitation in his voice. Matthew paused, and in that silence a realization slowly dawned on him. This is a test. There was no other explanation. After all, Li Hoi was the first research partner ever connected to a high mage in the tower's history. Someone in that position would naturally be cautious. He is testing the patience, courtesy, and composure of a high mage, Matthew concluded internally. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that this was some elaborate evaluation of his character. In the end, Matthew yielded first. But before he could say much more, Granfell spoke again. It is not simply difficult. It is excruciatingly difficult. Then he clarified in a calm, cutting tone, I must devote myself to the way of the sword. I have no time to waste on secretive private meetings. Matthew's voice turned nearly desperate. Then when would it not be difficult? I am willing to adjust entirely to your availability. Granfell appeared to think it over for a moment, as though granting mercy only after careful consideration. The morning after tomorrow. I can spare 1 hour. Matthew finally let out a breath he had clearly been holding. At last, thank you sincerely. From inside, Li Hoi stared helplessly at his own Granfell persona. We were planning to go to the Mage Tower around then anyway, so why is Matthew acting like he's been blessed by heaven? The owl took flight again, carrying the mage's last words away with it. I shall see you then. I will be waiting. Not far away, beneath the shade of a nearby tree, Commander Harkon watched the entire exchange with a knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He looked far too entertained by what he had just seen. Later that day, the training grounds of Yuzura Island rang with the harsh music of steel and shouted orders. The entire area was alive with motion, discipline, and the pressure of constant drills. Instructor Enoch barked commands at the trainees without mercy. Stabilize the blade tip. Put all your strength into your arm and strike through cleanly. His voice cracked across the field like a whip, leaving no room for hesitation. The trainees answered in perfect unison, Sir, yes, sir. Off to one side. In a more secluded corner of the grounds, Harkon approached Granfell with slow, measured steps. Granfell raised a brow slightly at the sight of him. What exactly is the meaning of this? He asked, cool and guarded. Harkon's expression turned grave as he spoke. I will say it again. I cannot teach you. The seriousness in his tone made the statement sound less insulting and more like a hard truth. Explain yourself, Granfell demanded at once. Harkon's eyes gleamed with intensity. I mean that literally, Sir Li Hoyal. You have already reached the threshold of enlightenment through the flames of real combat. Granfell's face remained expressionless, but inside, Li Hoyal was practically shaking. Real combat? What is this man even talking about? I've only been training for 1 day. Granfell narrowed his eyes and asked coldly, do you truly believe that, Sir Li Hoi? Harkon looked almost impressed by the question. You are underestimating yourself far too much. It borders on absurd. Then why not verify your mastery with the blade right now? Harkon suggested. Very well, Grandfell replied in a cold, steady voice. I have no idea what kind of misunderstanding he's trapped in, but if I lose control like I did yesterday, my stamina is going to hit 0 on the spot. Even so, there was no way to back down now. Focus. Grandfell slowly closed his eyes. I need to understand what sword ki actually is. It feels different from the magic circles I studied before, similar in some ways, but not the same. He forced his breathing to settle as he searched inward. They say anyone can learn it. Then, deep inside that silence, he touched upon a deeper truth. I can feel it now, a torrent of energy completely different from mana, twisting and coiling within my core like a living current. The sensation was raw, unfamiliar, and unmistakably real. If I control that flow the same way I control mana, then I should be able to use it. That idea sharpened in his mind with sudden clarity, turning instinct into method. The moment Harkon saw the shift in Grandfell's stance, he smiled. The commander's instincts were sharp enough to catch the smallest change. He already knew something extraordinary was about to happen. Grandfell was no ordinary man. Then, with a thunderous whoosh, azure light burst from his blade in a violent wave, bright and clean enough to split the air itself. The training ground seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Manifested sword ki. I see it now, Li Hoyal realized in sudden awe. The answer had been right there the whole time, just waiting for him to grasp it. Sword ki is just another form of energy, he thought. If I apply the same principles of exploration and interference that I use with mana, then even this unstable force can be guided and stabilized. The previously erratic current gathered into a perfect blade-like flow. Harkon stepped forward, stunned by what he was seeing. Such stable swordsmanship only comes from repeated effort and relentless discipline, Harkon said, his voice full of admiration. You may have missed yesterday's formal drill, but your solitary practice this morning says everything I need to know. There is no reason you cannot control this ki. Then suddenly, unable to contain himself, he grabbed Grandfell by the shoulders, his face flushed with excitement. Still, the full theory behind sword ki is a conversation for another time. What matters now is this. You are a natural-born genius of the blade. He leaned in uncomfortably close, pushing even Grandfell's composure to its limit. Sir Li Hoi, or should I say, my future disciple, will you walk the endless path of the sword with me? Li Hoi's soul screamed in horror. What is with that look? Why is he staring at me like that? This is terrifying. His instincts immediately fired off one clear answer. Run. I need to get away from this man right now. Even so, Grandfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo stood firm before Harkon and answered without flinching. Forgive me, but I have no intention of devoting my entire existence to the sword alone. His resolve came out sharper than polished steel. If a blade appears along the path before me, then I will walk that path without fear. Then I shall wield it. That is my way. The moment those lofty, dramatic words left his own mouth, Li Hoi wanted to bury himself alive from sheer second-hand embarrassment. Dear God, please stop. Please just stop talking. But Harkon's face lit up with pure delight. Grandfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo had exceeded even the old master's wildest expectations. With a bright, satisfied smile, Harkon waved cheerfully as he stepped back. I look forward to seeing what waits for you at the end of that road, young man. His voice carried both pride and excitement, as though he had just witnessed the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Grandfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo quietly turned his back on the scene. It was time to change his clothes and step away for a moment. Behind him, however, the other trainees had overheard enough of the conversation to draw their own conclusion. In their eyes, the path to the very peak of swordsmanship had never been clearer. It was not talent alone, but an unbreakable spirit and relentless hard work that carried a swordsman upward. The realization hit them like a shot of adrenaline straight through the heart. Their fighting spirit flared up all at once, hot and fierce. Enoch, Lauren, and Jesse exchanged faint, wry smiles as they watched the others burn with sudden inspiration. They had definitely misunderstood something important, but maybe it was better this way. Sometimes a misunderstanding was more useful than the truth. Jessica slowly lowered her head, and a dark shadow of gloom passed over her face. The excitement around her only made her own thoughts feel heavier. Come to think of it, I've never heard of anyone mastering sword aura in a single day. Li Hoyal truly is a genius living in a realm far above the rest of us. The more she thought about it, the more oppressive the gap felt. It was like staring across an endless abyss, a difference so vast that no amount of training, no matter how brutal, no matter how long, seemed enough to close it. Even if they trained until their arms and legs gave out, it might still never be enough. But then something hardened in her eyes. The hesitation faded, and in its place came steel. No, I am a swordsman of honor too. A day will come when I stand proudly shoulder to shoulder with those two. Enoch and Lauren were carrying the same weight in their hearts. To them, the distance to Li Hoyal felt almost infinite, like a mountain peak so high it disappeared into the clouds. But even so, they could not look away from it. Even if he had to run until his legs shattered beneath him, Enoch refused to back down. Because he, too, was a warrior with pride in his chest, the fire of determination rose inside him with fresh intensity. I am a swordsman of honor as well. I swear that one day I will fight beside them. Nearby, Harkon closed his eyes and smiled in quiet satisfaction, savoring the moment like a master seeing iron finally take shape in the forge. Everyone's spirit had been reforged in that instant. A single genius really did have the power to shake the hearts of everyone around him and change the air of an entire battlefield without even trying. It had been a long time since Harkon felt his own blood heat up with this kind of excitement. Meanwhile, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo wandered deeper into the thick forest, moving through the trees without any obvious destination in mind, as though he were simply following instinct. From within, Li Hoi watched the situation with growing unease. Harkon had said I could use this place for training, but something about it feels seriously off. He scanned the area, hoping to find some low-level monster he could use to test his new skills safely. Maybe there's a demonic deer around here or something. At least give me a classy, simple monster. Then, without warning, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's instincts screamed at him. Danger! From the tangled shadows of the brush, a white beast streaked with ink-black spots stepped out in absolute silence. Its body was sleek, powerful, and built for killing. Its eyes blazed with raw, primal bloodlust, the kind that made the air itself feel colder. It was a platinum Li Hoyard, level 300. Li Hoi immediately tried to use his detection skill, hoping for some hidden weakness or clue, but the result gave him nothing that would classify it as a demon. That single failure made the situation feel much worse. The natural enemy trait did not activate. Panic crashed into him at once. Damn it, I asked for a deer, not a giant predatory cat. The moment he compared that monster to Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's current level of 226, despair hit even harder. The gap was 74 levels. Are the devs completely insane? But fear did not exist in Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's vocabulary. He faced the beast with the same cold arrogance as ever, standing tall as if the difference in level meant nothing at all. Do you think your fangs are so magnificent that you must keep bearing them? You shameless beast. With that, he drew his sword in one clean motion, and sword aura flared to life around the blade. At the same time, the noble's dignity activated, turning his already ridiculous confidence into something almost unbearable.